Plum Girl, the Taiyuan pavilion lost his wife and was very lonely, so he went to the Fucheng store to take a break. One day I was resting in the hotel, awake, vaguely seeing a young woman on the wall, like a picture hanging over it. At first, he laughed at his wife's insanity, but stared at her for half a day. And the pictures didn't disappear. Closer, it became clearer that a girl was a bitter face with a tongue stuck out and a string around her neck. The maiden was in shock, but the girl was walking slowly down the wall. The maid knows he's got a hanger, but in daylight, he's got a lot of guts, and he says, "You don't have to frighten the maid. You have a grudge, and the maid can work for you." This said, the woman really fell down, saying, "How dare you and I meet each other? How dare you make a big deal out of it?" But the bones under the 9 springs, after all these years, the tongue won't shrink back and the rope cover won't come off. It's very miserable. Please, let the master cut the beam and burn it. You're so grateful to me. When the boondocks promise to do it, the shadows disappear. We'll call the owner and find out what's going on. More than 10 years ago, this was the home of the May family, the owner said. The thieves came in one night, got caught by the May family, and sent them to the county hall to be handed over to the imperial court. However, Xiaoyu accepted a 300-cent bribe, framed May's daughter for adultery with a thief, and detained her in the hall so that the forensic doctor could examine her. After hearing about it, May hung herself. Soon after, the Magias died, and the house was mine. Over the years, travelers have often said that they can't keep quiet because they're screwed. He sent the hangman's request to the owner. The owner calculated that the roof was torn down for the beam, too expensive to afford, and difficult to look at. The project was completed with generous financial support. After the repairs, Feng Sheng still lives in the house. At night, May arrives, a blessing in disguise, and expresses her gratitude to the boondocks. In a moment of joy, hands raised, light, turned out to be a very beautiful girl. "The spirit of the ghost is harmful to you," she says, sadly but shyly. "Besides, isn't the shame of my life that I couldn't wash away the 2 rivers? We're going to be together happily ever after. It's not quite the time." Fang asked, "When will it be?" The plum maiden smiled and gave up her voice. Fang Sheng said, "Have a drink." Mei Nu said, "I don't drink." And to the beautiful, just looking at them silently, "What does it taste like?" Mei said, "The only thing I've ever liked in my life is playing chess. But to people are not busy, and there is no way to find the board in the middle of the night. Indeed, long nights are hard enough, so I'll play a game of flip-flops with you." I had to follow him. The 2 of them take a knee and slit their fingers, and the plum girl flipped it over. I didn't realize this little thing was changing. After a long journey, the students were confused and didn't know how to act. The beauty teaches him with a laugh, and then she shows her eyes, and the more strange, the more wonderful. "It's a masterstroke in a boudoir," he said with delight. "This is a trick I came up with. With these 2 threads, I can weave any pattern, but the average person doesn't think about it very carefully," she says. "It's late. If you're tired, Mei Nu will let the baby go to bed." She said, "I'm a vagina. I don't sleep. Rest on your own. When I was a kid, I could do massages and give you a little bit of magic to help you dream." The plum girl starts with a massage, first with her hands folded up, rubbing gently, head to toe. Maidens go through the place where they feel the flesh and blood is loose, like drunk and lazy. The plum girl then clenched her fist and banged her again, feeling as comfortable, wonderful as being struck by a cotton flock. "I'm so close. I'm lazy to sleep." To the thighs, it sunk into a dream. It was noon the next day when Feng woke up. When I woke up, I felt relaxed and clear, and I adored the plum girl more and called her name around the wall, but I couldn't say yes. "It's only in the evening that May is here. Where do you want to live? Tell me to call it all over." May laughed and said, "The ghost has a place to live. It's just underground." Fang asked, "Is there a gap in the ground that can accommodate you?" The plum girl added, "It's like a fish without water." Holding May's hand, Feng Sheng said, "If only it would bring you back to life. I'll give up everything. We don't have to lose everything," she laughs. The two began playing the game of flip flowers again late into the night. A prostitute from Zhejiang province named Aiking, a very elegant young woman, who recently lives in the northern neighborhood, said, "Don't bother me. How about I invite her to stay with you tomorrow night?" The next night, the plum girl brought in a young woman, who was about 30 years old. She looked at her smile, her eyes flashed, and she was in love with her prostitutes. The three gathered together to play equestrian chess, and the plum maiden resigned, while Aiking stayed with Feng Sheng for the night. When asked about her family, Aiking was vaguely vague, saying only that, "If you like me, you can bounce the north wall with your fingers and shout Kiluzi in a whisper, and I will come. If there is no answer to 3 calls, then I have no time, so stop shouting." At dawn, Aiking disappeared from the northern wall. The next night, Mei came by herself and asked why Aiking was not coming. Mei said, "I was invited by Gao to accompany him." The two men sat down and spoke by candlelight. As the storm raged, Mei was silent. "You move your lips a little bit, like you have something to say, but you don't say anything to your lips." She was asked repeatedly, weeping and never saying anything. Feng Sheng barely scraped her out of line, so she couldn't bring herself, and left for more days later. Since then, Mei and Aiking have often come to the boarded-up place together, laughing all night long, so this incident has spread throughout the city and is well known from far and near. It happens to be a classic history that the family, originally from Zhejiang province, was laid off by his wife for adultery with a servant, and married to a Gu clan, who was in a good relationship and sadly died within a month, so he missed her all the time. Now, I hear that Feng Sheng has to ghost friends who want to ask him for a bit of innocence to see if I have a connection with Gu Shi, so I ride a horse to visit Feng Sheng. At first, Feng Sheng refused to allow it, so he couldn't bear the pleas of this history. He invited the history to drink, and promised to invite ghost prostitutes to discuss it at night. After sunset and darkness in the room, the boondocks walked up to the north wall, tapping and shouting 3 times. The voice is still there, the love is already there. She looked up, she had a sudden change of face. She turned her head and laughed. The seal was about to come up and stop, and this classic was already in a tizzy, grabbing a bull and hurling it over. And the love affair vanished with the sound of the claptrap. Suddenly an old woman emerges from the dark room and shouts, "You're a dirty thief who's killing money. You broke my family's money, cow. I have to pay 30 grand. He scolds and whips his crutches, hitting them on the head of the history books. The classics hugged their heads and cried, "That woman is Gu, my wife. I'm still mourning her young death. Who would have thought she was a ghost? But how does that have anything to do with your wife?" The old woman berated him with rage. "You were a rogue hoodlum in Zhejiang province. You paid for this rotten officer. With this black horn belt on, your nose will be upside down. What's black and white for you? $300 in your pocket. Your father, you're a bitch. You're dead." Your father and mother begged repeatedly in the shadows, preferring to let your wife-in-law become a prostitute and pay off your debts. You're still in the dark. It's just that I'm screaming and screaming with horror on the floor. Feng Sheng was there, surprised and anxious, and unable to figure out how to deal with it. I saw Mei coming out of her room, and I saw the history books. And I was so angry that my face was all white. I jumped over and took off my head and looked at the history books. Even more frightened, he quickly covered the history with his body and persuaded, even if he is guilty, he will die here, and the children will be difficult to confess. Please throw in the rat's box. That's why she stopped, and then she pulled the old lady back. Let's put him out of his misery for a while. This is the history of the first time I've seen it. I've been in a hurry, and I've been crawling around with a rat. I heard he got a headache when he got back to the office. He died in the middle of the night. The next evening, when Mei came, she said with glee, "What a pleasure. Finally, I worked out this bad breath. That's why you're asking, what's your grudge?" Mei said, "I told you before. This guy is the one who took bribes and raped me. I've been wrong for years. Every time I ask you to avenge me, I always feel bad for you. That's why I'm not saying anything. Yesterday I happened to hear a fight, and I was listening. I didn't think it was the enemy, Feng Sheng was also surprised to say. He's the bad guy who framed you, Mei said. He has been pawning in this county for 18 years. I have died of innocence for 16 years, Feng asked who the wife was. And Mei said that she was a madam, and I king. And Mei said, she is getting sick. When the complaint was filed, Mei smiled and said to the Feng Sheng, I said that the union had a long term. And now, it's not far away. Have you ever said you'd rather give me everything you want and remember? Feng Sheng said, today is still the day, Mei said. I'll tell you the truth, I was born the day I died at Yan'an's and Xiaolian's home. He's still here because of his unreported vendetta. Now, you're gonna make a little pocket of the new cloth and put my ghost in it so I can follow you. When you get there, you ask the exhibitor to marry you, and I promise you his family will. Mr. Feng also worries that the two main deaths are too different to be successful. Mei said, don't worry, just go, don't call me on the way. On the evening of your marriage, hang a little cloth bag on the bride's head and call out, never forget it. It's done. I promised Kazuichi. When we're ready to stop, the lockdown opens the little bag of cloth, the plum dives in, and we all go to Yan'an together. Yan'an had a girl who was very handsome, but had dementia, and her tongue was always sticking out of her lips, like a hot dog breathing. It was ugly and scary, so she was 16 years old and didn't dare to bring up a parent. It was a big heart attack for both parents. Feng first came to the door to post a story about his family, and then the matchmaker said hello. The exhibitors were naturally delighted and brought the boil to their homes. At the wedding, the bride was still foolish and didn't know any manners, and the two maids dragged each other into the cave. After the maids left, she untucked her top, exposed her breasts and laughed straight at the animal. Never forget, the bride whispered. Never forget, never forget. The bride hears the call, muses, and is attentive to the closure as her eyes brighten. Feng Sheng laughed and said, don't you recognize children? The bride was awake, shaking again with a small cloth bag, and the two of them made out and laughed. The next morning, Feng Sheng went to see his father-in-law. My daughter is ignorant of dementia, and you can see that since you've become a friend. If you're interested, my family has some smart testicles. Which one you see, I'll give it to you. Never stint on it, he said. Feng Sheng defended herself, saying that Miss is not stupid, and everyone is confused. After a while, her daughter went to the court to pay respects, and she was more surprised, smiling. When asked why, the daughter was shy and difficult to say. She told the story from the side. I'm happier and love this daughter more than ever. From then on, I let my son study with Kazumi, and everything was plentiful. After more than a year, Taisei began to look disdainful, and the relations between his brother and his uncle ceased. Then the servants looked at the dish and began to speak ill of the seal in front of the master. Exhibitors listen to a lot of gossip, and are less polite about how many times they're going to be ruined. The father-in-law's house is not a permanent place after all. The father-in-law's house is full of crap, she persuaded. Let's go home before there's a big crack. He also took it seriously and told his father-in-law goodbye. I want to leave my daughter, but I don't want to. Now, the father and brother are on fire, so they don't give up. The exhibition girl took out her jewelry and sold it, hiring a car and a horse to go home. Later, she wrote to her daughter to see her home, but she insisted. The two families did not get along until they were born.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.